it's pretty evident that the world has changed. Since the crisis, social and economic crisis we've seen in the recent years, there's no doubt that we live in a different world. The values we adopted as a society in the 20th century have changed as well. And I ask you, what are we doing to act accordingly to this new world we live in? At Rubber Band Design Studio, a transformation design firm I co-founded with Marimate O'Neill, a former college professor of mine, we designed a methodology taken from multiple disciplines that promote what we believe are the necessary skills for the sustainable development of society in the 21st century. I'm going to explain this, telling you about a nanoscience and architecture exhibition we designed for the Casa Roy Museum in Humacao. There you go. The Casa Roy Museum is part of the system of museums of the University of Puerto Rico. And more specifically, I'm going to tell you about a game we designed with 8 high schoolers from local public school, Petra Mercado. The challenge was to teach a group of teenagers the basics of nanoscience and design, which, as you can imagine, are pretty complex concepts. In addition to that, we had to guide them in the process of creating something that would teach other kids like them the same thing. And we only had 3 hours with them. We had no doubt that with the right tools provided, they could do it. So we reflected on what were the tools these kids needed to complete the task. We agreed on a set of 4 skills, and we got them together. First, we interviewed them, and they told us that they prefer to learn collectively and by doing. Then we invited them to the museum. For some of them, this was the first time ever to visit a museum. So we separated them into 3 groups and briefed them. The task, to design 3 games that would teach other kids the role of nanoscience and design in everyday life. First group had the topic of color. What is color to a designer, and what is color to a nanoscientist? Group 2 had the same question, but about materials. And group 3 with scale. So that was the task. But how would they do it? They were not designers. They were not nanoscientists. They were just regular high school kids. The first thing they had to do, and this is the first skill on our set of 21st century skills, was synthesis. We use it all the time in our design practice. But what does it really mean to synthesize? Well, these kids had just gotten a huge load of information. And 5 minutes later, they were being asked to explain it to other kids using only a small box of craft materials that we gave them. First thing they had to do was establish priorities. They knew they weren't going to be able to tell everything, especially with the limited access to materials they had. And second, they had to think fast, on their feet, because the clock was ticking. They only had 20 minutes to complete the task. So they had to have mental agility. And why is this related to the 21st century? Well, we live in a fast-paced world, right? We all know that. Digital communication comes by fast, and it comes in by big lots. So these days, if you want to get your point across, you better set priorities, and you better have mental agility, because if not, you just might lose your shot. Next skill I'm going to talk about is collaboration. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with this one. But again, what does it mean when we talk about collaborating? When we first met these kids, we had no idea if they were friends or even if they were in the same class. We just didn't know. So we had to establish a collaborative environment based on the respect for differences. Because a good collaboration is based on negotiation. A negotiation of knowledge, where your knowledge is not above or below my knowledge. And sure, we all have different types of knowledge, but in a good collaboration, they are all equally valid. Next thing you needed was communication. So for good communication, what did they have to do? They had to learn to listen. And third, they needed accountability. Because if I'm going to expect that you respect my point, I have to stand by my actions and my decisions in our common process. And above all, avoid playing blame games and getting into blaming culture. Next skill is anchorness. To be anchored, to contextualize what you do. Maybe this is a new one. Let's take an example. I live in SanJuan, born and raised. I've only been to Humacao in road trips with friends and for work when I visit the museum. If I or any of the designers on our team would have designed this game, it would be interesting. I mean, I think we're good designers. But it would probably be interesting to maybe late 20s designish type of people. And that was just it. It wasn't about us. So in order to be effective, we had to anchor our design in the community it was meant to serve. One of the kids suggested that for the game, we use a picture of a boy wearing a pair of Jordan sneakers, because that's a visual symbol that responds to them. And in the end, it's about them. So you have to speak their language. And the last skill I'm going to talk about today, the last skill for the 21st century, is the skill to be at ease with error. To err is human. We all make mistakes. But we need to find a way to be comfortable with our mistakes, because in them, we can find the lessons to do it better next time. Or even better, we can see the opportunities to consider roads we initially did not consider. But to be at ease with error and learn from them, we need to reflect. So remember when I was saying about how we live in a fast-paced world? Well, that you need to create a balance between fast feet and reflection. After the 20 minutes were done, all the groups came back together and they presented their game proposals. They later had a second 20-minute session to do revisions, but basically, these were their solutions. First, a color wheel game, combining basic color theory and the way a color can transform when the material is looked at nanoscale. Second, a model of a city composed of different materials, because when you combine different materials, you obtain different results. And third, a three-dimensional model of how things are interpreted differently when you look at them through different scales. So we took the kids' prototypes back to the office, and with our industrial designer, Gabriel Miranda, we turned them into this. The model of the city, we changed it to be a puzzle of the Casa Roy, the building where the museum is housed in. Yeah, they all look different, but the essence of each game is still there. Some of the kids that co-designed the game with us came back to the exhibition, and they even brought the rest of the class with them. You know, I believe in these skills because I am the result of them. These skills were used by a professor of mine that today is my business partner. And she used them to guide me and a group of young designers in a typographic rescue project that we call Hotel Excelsior Typography. So our task was to articulate concepts of design history, national history, creativity, and technology through the design of letters. More recently, we used it at the office for a short series of comic strips we co-designed with cancer patients to promote their personal strategies to navigate the road to wellness. We call this Proyecto C. And you may wonder, what is it about these skills that are effective in getting people together and getting things done? Well, because they create ownership. Ownership is the result of these skills put into practice. When we feel something is ours, we protect it and we care for it. Ownership helps us claim responsibility over something. And more importantly, when we talk about the development of youth and communities, it moves us to action. When we feel something is ours, we do not stand idly by while it is trampled on. So I'll invite you all to think on how our values as a society have changed over the years and take ownership of our communities for the development of tomorrow's generation. Gracias.